Section 1. Genesis, the Battle of the Kings. Genesis chapter 14, 1-16. Title: The Battle of the Kings. Abram rescues Lot. In the days of Abram, war raged across the land of Canaan. 4 powerful kings, led by King Chedorlaomer, waged war against 5 rebellious kings, including the ruler of Sodom and Gomorrah. The battle was fierce, and the armies of Sodom and its allies were defeated. The victors looted the cities, seizing wealth and captives, including Lot, Abram's nephew. When the news reached Abram, he wasted no time. He gathered 318 trained men from his household and set out under the cover of night. His plan was bold, a surprise attack. Under the moonlight, Abram and his warriors launched their assault. Dividing his forces, he struck from multiple directions, throwing the enemy into chaos. The battle was swift, and the invading kings fled, abandoning their spoils. Lot and the other captives were freed. As Abram returned victorious, the mysterious priest Melchizedek, king of Salem, met him, offering bread and wine, blessing him in the name of God Most High. In gratitude, Abram gave 1/10 of all he had to Melchizedek, a gesture of faith and honor. Section 2. Exodus, the battle against Amalek. Exodus 17, 8-16. Title: Moses, Aaron, and Hur. The battle against Amalek. As the Israelites journeyed through the wilderness, the Amalekites attacked them at Rephidim. The enemy was ruthless, preying on the weary and weak among them. Moses called upon Joshua, "Choose men and go fight Amalek. I will stand on the hilltop with the staff of God in my hand." The battle raged as Joshua led the Israelites into the fight. But the true power of the battle was not in swords or spears, it was in Moses' raised hands. As long as Moses lifted the staff of God, Israel prevailed. When his arms grew weary and fell, Amalek gained the advantage. Seeing this, Aaron and Hur acted quickly. They found a stone for Moses to sit on. Then they held up his hands, one on each side, until the sun set. Strengthened by God's power, Joshua and his men overwhelmed the Amalekites. After the victory, God commanded Moses, "Write this as a memorial. I will completely blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven." Moses built an altar and called it Jehovah Nissi, "The Lord is my banner," for the victory came not by might, but by faith in God. Section 3. Numbers. The battle against the Canaanites at Hormah. Numbers 21, 1-3. Title: Israel's vow and victory over the Canaanites. As the Israelites journeyed through the wilderness, the king of Arad, a Canaanite ruler, attacked them and took captives. The people of Israel, weary yet determined, cried out to the Lord, "If you deliver these people into our hands, we will completely destroy their cities." The Lord heard their plea and gave them victory over the Canaanites. The Israelites utterly destroyed the enemy's strongholds and renamed the place Hormah, meaning destruction. This battle was a turning point, a testimony that God would fight for his people when they trusted in him. Section 23. Israel versus Canaanites at Hormah. Numbers 21, 1-3. The Israelites journeyed through the wilderness when King Arad of Canaan launched a surprise attack, capturing some of their people. Fear spread among Israel, but instead of retreating, they turned to God in prayer. "Lord, if you will give these people into our hands, we will utterly destroy their cities." Hearing their plea, God answered. Strengthened by divine favor, Israel charged into battle, overwhelming the Canaanite army. Their enemies fell, and the cities were utterly destroyed. The Israelites named the place Hormah, meaning destruction, a testament to God's faithfulness in delivering them from their enemies. This battle proved that victory belongs to those who trust in the Lord. Section 5. Israel versus Sihon, king of the Amorites. Numbers 21, 21-25. The Israelites, approaching the land of the Amorites, sent messengers to King Sihon, with a peaceful request. "Let us pass through your land. We will not turn aside into fields or vineyards. We will stay on the main road." But Sihon refused. Instead, he gathered his army and marched out to attack Israel at Jahaz. The battle erupted. The Amorites, confident in their strength, charged forward. But the Lord was with Israel. With divine power and unwavering courage, the Israelites struck down Sihon's forces, leaving none standing. With victory secured, Israel took possession of the entire land of the Amorites, from the Arnon River to the Jabbok, and settled in their cities, including Heshbon, the former capital of King Sihon. This battle was a testament that no enemy can stand against the will of the Lord. Section 6. Deuteronomy. God's command on warfare. Deuteronomy 7:1-2, 20:1-4, 28:7. Title: God's command to destroy the Canaanites and his promise in war. As the Israelites prepared to enter the promised land, Moses stood before them and spoke the words of the Lord. "When the Lord your God brings you into the land you are entering to possess and drives out the many nations before you, the Hittites, Girgashites, Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites, 7 nations larger and stronger than you must destroy them completely. Make no treaty with them and show them no mercy." Deuteronomy 7:1-2. The Israelites, though smaller in number, were commanded to trust in the Lord. He promised them victory. When you go to war against your enemies and see horses and chariots and an army greater than yours, do not be afraid. For the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt, will be with you. Deuteronomy 20:1-4. And his assurance was clear. The Lord will cause your enemies who rise against you to be defeated before you. They will come against you one way and flee before you in 7. Deuteronomy 28:7. With faith in God, Israel was to march into battle, knowing that no enemy could stand against them as long as they obeyed his commands. Section 7. Joshua, the Battle of Jericho. Joshua 6:1-27. Title: The Walls of Jericho Fall. Jericho, a city of great walls and strong defenses, stood before the Israelites as their first challenge in the Promised Land. But God had a plan. The Lord spoke to Joshua. "See, I have given Jericho into your hands, along with its king and mighty warriors. March around the city once each day for 6 days. On the 7th day, march around it 7 times. Then let the priests blow their trumpets and give a loud shout. The walls will collapse." For 6 days the Israelites marched in silence, only the sound of rams' horns filling the air. On the 7th day, they marched around Jericho 7 times. As the last trumpet sounded, Joshua commanded, "Shout, for the Lord has given you the city." The Israelites lifted their voices in a mighty cry, and the walls of Jericho crumbled before them. The soldiers rushed in, conquering the city as the Lord commanded. Only Rahab and her family were spared, for she had hidden the Israelite spies. This victory was a reminder that faith in God, not human strength, brings true victory. Section 8. Joshua, the Battle of Ai. Joshua 7:8. Title: Defeat and Redemption, the Battle of Ai. After the great victory at Jericho, Joshua led the Israelites against Ai, expecting another easy victory. But something was wrong. As the Israelites attacked, the men of Ai fought back fiercely, and Israel was defeated, losing 36 warriors. The people were shaken. Joshua fell before the Lord, crying, "Why have you brought us here, only to be defeated?" The Lord answered, "Israel has sinned. They have taken the devoted things. You will not stand against your enemies until you remove the sin from among you." Achan, a man from Judah, had stolen forbidden treasures from Jericho and hidden them in his tent. Because of his disobedience, Israel lost God's protection. Once Achan was punished, God restored his favor. Joshua devised a new strategy, an ambush. Israel sent a small army to attack Ai, pretending to retreat as before. The men of Ai, thinking Israel was weak, chased after them, leaving their city unguarded. At that moment, Joshua's hidden forces rushed in and set Ai on fire. With nowhere to run, Ai's army was crushed and the city was completely destroyed. This battle taught Israel a lesson. Victory comes only through obedience to God. Section 9. Joshua. The battle against the 5 Amorite kings. Joshua 10:1-15. Title: The day the sun stood still. Israel's victory over the Amorite kings. After the Israelites made a treaty with the Gibeonites, 5 powerful Amorite kings, led by King Adoni-Zedek of Jerusalem, gathered their armies to destroy Gibeon. The Gibeonites sent an urgent plea to Joshua. "Come quickly, save us. The Amorite kings have come against us." Without hesitation, Joshua and the Israelite army marched all night and launched a surprise attack at dawn. The Amorites were caught off guard, and the battle turned in Israel's favor. As the enemy fled, the Lord sent a great hailstorm, and more Amorites died from the hail than from the sword. Then, in an unprecedented miracle, Joshua called out to God before all Israel, "Sun, stand still over Gibeon, and moon over the valley of Aijalon." And the sun stopped in the sky until Israel had completely defeated their enemies. Never before or since had God listened to a man in such a way, showing that the Lord himself fights for his people. The 5 Amorite kings fled and hid in a cave, but Joshua captured them, executed judgment, and secured complete victory over the land. This battle demonstrated that when God fights for his people, even the forces of nature obey his command. Section 10. Joshua. The battle against King Jabin of Hazor. Joshua 11:1-23. Title: The Northern Campaign, Israel's victory over Hazor. After Israel's victories in the south, the northern kings, led by King Jabin of Hazor, formed a massive alliance. They gathered at the waters of Merom, bringing together an army as numerous as the sand on the seashore, with horses and chariots of war. The Lord spoke to Joshua, "Do not be afraid of them, for by this time tomorrow I will hand all of them over to Israel, slain. You shall hamstring their horses and burn their chariots." Joshua led a surprise attack, striking the enemy with overwhelming force. The Lord delivered them into Israel's hands, and the enemy fled in every direction. Hazor, the strongest city in Canaan, was completely destroyed. King Jabin was slain, and Joshua burned Hazor to the ground, fulfilling God's command to eliminate the wicked nations. With this victory, Israel took control of the entire Promised Land. The conquest was complete, and the land finally rested from war. This battle was a reminder that no force, no matter how great, can stand against the power of God. Section 11. Judges. Deborah and Barak's victory over Sisera. Judges 4:1-24. Title: The defeat of Sisera, victory through a woman's hand. After Israel turned from God, they fell under the cruel oppression of King Jabin of Canaan, whose commander, Sisera, led an army with 900 iron chariots. For 20 years the Israelites suffered, until Deborah, a prophetess and judge, called upon Barak, "Take 10,000 men and go to Mount Tabor. The Lord will draw out Sisera's army to the Kishon River and deliver them into your hands." Barak obeyed, but insisted, "I will go, but only if you go with me." Deborah agreed, but declared, "The honor will not be yours. The Lord will deliver Sisera into the hands of a woman." As the battle began, the Lord sent a mighty storm, flooding the Kishon River. Sisera's chariots became useless in the mud, and Barak's forces overwhelmed the enemy. Seeing the defeat, Sisera abandoned his chariot and fled on foot. He reached the tent of Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite. Seeking refuge, he asked for water, but Jael gave him milk and covered him with a blanket. As he fell asleep, Jael took a tent peg and drove it through his head, killing him. When Barak arrived, Jael showed him Sisera's lifeless body. Thus, God gave Israel victory, not by the might of men, but through the faithfulness of Deborah and the courage of Jael. Section 12. Judges. Gideon's miraculous victory over the Midianites. Judges 7:1-25. Title: The Battle of 300. Gideon's triumph over a mighty army. For 7 years, the Midianites oppressed Israel, stealing their crops and livestock. When the Israelites cried out, God chose Gideon, the least of his family, to deliver them. Gathering 32,000 men, Gideon prepared for war. But the Lord told him, "You have too many men. Israel might think they won by their own strength. Tell the fearful to leave." 22,000 men departed, leaving only 10,000. But God said again, "Still too many. Take them to the water, and I will test them." Only 300 men remained, chosen because they drank water by bringing it to their mouths instead of kneeling. With this small army, God would show his power. That night, Gideon and his 300 warriors surrounded the massive Midianite camp. At Gideon's signal, they broke clay jars, raised torches, and blew trumpets, shouting, "A sword for the Lord and for Gideon." The Midianite army panicked, thinking they were surrounded by a vast force. They turned on each other in confusion and fled. Israel pursued them, capturing their kings and securing a miraculous victory without ever wielding a sword. This battle proved that God does not need numbers, only faith and obedience. Section 13. Judges. Samson's battle against the Philistines. Judges 15:14-20. Title: Samson and the Jawbone. One man against 1,000. Samson, a man chosen by God before birth, was given supernatural strength to deliver Israel from the Philistines. But after the Philistines burned his wife and family, Samson sought vengeance. The Philistines came to the Israelites, demanding Samson be handed over. Bound with new ropes, Samson was delivered to his enemies. But as they approached, the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him. The ropes on his arms became like charred flax, and the bindings dropped from his hands. Judges 15:14. Seeing a donkey's jawbone nearby, Samson grabbed it and attacked. With only this crude weapon, he struck down 1,000 Philistine warriors. As the last enemy fell, Samson declared, "With a donkey's jawbone, I have made donkeys of them. With a donkey's jawbone, I have slain 1,000 men." Exhausted and thirsty, Samson cried out to God, and the Lord miraculously provided water from a hollow place, reviving him. For 20 years, Samson continued as Israel's judge, a man whose strength came not from himself, but from God's Spirit. Section 14, 1 Samuel, the Battle of Mizpah, 1 Samuel 7:7-13. Title: Samuel's Prayer and Israel's Victory over the Philistines. For 20 years, the Israelites suffered under Philistine oppression because they had turned from God. But Samuel, the prophet and judge of Israel, called them to repentance at Mizpah. "Put away your foreign gods and return to the Lord with all your heart," he commanded. As Israel gathered at Mizpah, fasting and repenting, the Philistines saw their assembly as an opportunity to attack. With their powerful army, they marched toward Israel. Fear gripped the Israelites. They cried out to Samuel, "Do not stop crying out to the Lord our God for us, that he may save us from the Philistines." Samuel offered a burnt sacrifice, praying fervently to God. As the Philistines rushed in for the attack, the Lord sent a mighty thunderstorm, shaking the ground and throwing the enemy into panic and confusion. Seizing the moment, the Israelites charged forward and pursued the Philistines, striking them down all the way to Beth-kar. After the victory, Samuel set up a stone and named it Ebenezer, meaning, "Thus far the Lord has helped us." This battle showed that true victory comes not by strength, but through faith and repentance before the Lord. Section 15, 1 Samuel, David's battle against Goliath, 1 Samuel 17, 1-58. Title: The boy who defeated a giant, David versus Goliath. The Philistine army gathered at the valley of Elah, challenging Israel to send their greatest warrior. From their ranks emerged Goliath of Gath, a giant over 9 feet tall, covered in armor, wielding a massive spear. For 40 days he mocked Israel. "Choose a man to fight me. If he defeats me, we will serve you. But if I win, you will be our slaves." The Israelites trembled, too afraid to face the giant. But a young shepherd named David, sent by his father to deliver food to his brothers, heard Goliath's challenge. Filled with faith, he declared, "Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God?" King Saul tried to equip David with his royal armor, but David refused. Armed only with a sling and 5 smooth stones, he approached the battlefield. As Goliath laughed, David boldly declared, "You come against me with sword and spear, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty." David ran forward, swinging his sling. The stone flew straight into Goliath's forehead, and the giant fell face down to the ground. Seizing Goliath's own sword, David cut off his head. The Philistine army fled in terror, and Israel pursued them in victory. This battle proved that God does not save by sword or spear, but by faith in his name. Section 16. 1 Samuel, Saul's final battle against the Philistines. 1 Samuel chapter 31, 1-13. Title: The Fall of King Saul. Battle at Mount Gilboa. The Philistine army gathered to wage war against Israel at Mount Gilboa. King Saul, who had turned away from God, faced his greatest battle. As the Philistines advanced, Israel's army was overwhelmed, and the warriors began to flee. The enemy struck down Saul's sons, including Jonathan, his faithful son, and David's closest friend. Then the Philistine archers spotted Saul, unleashing a deadly hail of arrows. Saul was severely wounded. Seeing his fate, he turned to his armor-bearer. "Draw your sword and kill me, so these uncircumcised Philistines do not abuse me." But the armor-bearer refused in fear, so Saul took his own sword and fell on it, ending his life. His armor-bearer followed, and Israel suffered a devastating defeat. The next day, the Philistines found Saul's body. They cut off his head, stripped his armor, and hung his body on the walls of Beth-shan, celebrating their victory. But when the brave men of Jabesh-Gilead heard of Saul's fate, they marched through the night, retrieved his body, and gave him a proper burial. Thus ended the reign of Israel's first king, a tragic fall that showed the consequences of disobedience and rejecting the Lord. Section 17. 2 Samuel, David's victories over the Philistines. In Samuel 5:17-25. Title: David's triumph, the sound of marching in the trees. After David was anointed king over all Israel, the Philistines marched against him, seeking to crush his rule before it could be fully established. David inquired of the Lord, "Shall I go and attack the Philistines? Will you deliver them into my hands?" And the Lord answered, "Go, for I will surely deliver the Philistines into your hands." At Baal-perazim, David and his warriors launched a fierce attack, defeating the Philistines with God's power. The enemy fled, abandoning their idols, which David's men destroyed. But the Philistines returned again, regrouping in the valley of Rephaim. This time, God gave David a different strategy. Do not go straight up. Instead, circle around behind them and attack near the balsam trees. When you hear the sound of marching in the tops of the trees, move quickly, for that is the Lord going before you to strike down the Philistine army. David obeyed. As they waited, a mysterious sound of marching echoed through the trees, a divine sign. At once, David's forces struck, and the Philistines were completely routed from Gibeon to Gaza. This victory proved that when God fights for his people, even nature obeys his command. Section 19, 2 Chronicles, Jehoshaphat's victory without fighting. 2 Chronicles 21-30. A great army from Moab, Ammon, and Mount Seir marched against Judah. King Jehoshaphat, knowing they were outnumbered, turned to the Lord in prayer. "We do not know what to do, but our eyes are on you." 2 Chronicles 20:12. Then the Spirit of the Lord came upon Jehaziel, a Levite, who declared, "Do not be afraid. The battle is not yours, but God's. Stand firm and see the salvation of the Lord." Instead of swords, Jehoshaphat appointed singers to lead the army, praising God as they marched to the battlefield. "Give thanks to the Lord, for his love endures forever." As they sang, God caused their enemies to turn against one another, fighting among themselves until no one remained. Without lifting a single weapon, Judah won the battle. For 3 days they gathered the spoil, and Jehoshaphat named the place the Valley of Blessing, for the Lord had given them a miraculous victory. This battle proved that praise and faith in God bring greater victories than the might of men. Section 20. 2 Kings, Elisha and the Invisible Army. 2 Kings 6:8-23. Title: The Heavenly Army. Chariots of fire surround the enemy. The king of Aram, enraged that Elisha revealed his battle plans to Israel, sent a great army to capture him in Dothan. At dawn, Elisha's servant awoke to see horses and chariots surrounding the city. Terrified, he cried out, "Oh, my lord, what shall we do?" But Elisha, calm and unshaken, replied, "Do not be afraid. Those who are with us are more than those who are with them." Then Elisha prayed, "Open his eyes, Lord, so he may see." At once the servant's eyes were opened, and he saw the mountains filled with fiery chariots and angelic warriors, God's invisible army standing ready to fight. As the enemy advanced, Elisha prayed again, "Strike them with blindness, Lord." Suddenly, the entire Aramean army was blinded. Elisha led them to Samaria, where their sight was restored. Instead of being slaughtered, they were fed and sent home in peace. Because of this divine intervention, Aram stopped attacking Israel, proving that God fights for his people in ways unseen. Section 21. Isaiah, the angel of the Lord, strikes down the Assyrian army. Isaiah 37:33-38. During the reign of King Hezekiah, the mighty Assyrian Empire, led by King Sennacherib, marched toward Jerusalem, boasting of their power. Sennacherib's commander mocked Hezekiah, "Do not trust in the Lord. No God has saved any nation from the king of Assyria." Terrified, Hezekiah took the letter of threats to the temple and laid it before God, praying, "Lord Almighty, you alone are God. Deliver us, so that all kingdoms may know that you alone are Lord." That night, the prophet Isaiah brought a message from the Lord. "Sennacherib will not enter this city or shoot an arrow here. I will defend this city and save it for my sake." As Jerusalem slept, the angel of the Lord descended upon the Assyrian camp. In a single night, 185,000 soldiers were struck down. At dawn, the remaining Assyrians awoke to see their entire army destroyed. Horrified, Sennacherib fled to Nineveh, where his own sons assassinated him in the temple of his god. This battle, won without a single sword from Judah, proved that God alone defends his people. Section 22. Ezekiel, the prophecy of Gog and Magog. Ezekiel 38-39. Title: The Final Battle. God's fire against Gog and Magog. The Lord spoke to Ezekiel, revealing a prophecy of a future war, a time when a great alliance, led by Gog of the land of Magog, would march against Israel. "You will come from the far north with a vast army, a mighty horde with horses and chariots, covering the land like a storm." But the Lord declared his judgment. "I will summon a great earthquake. Every mountain will collapse. Every wall will fall. I will call for a sword against you, and your armies will turn on each other." As the invaders advanced, God sent fire and brimstone from heaven, consuming them before they could strike. Plague, torrential rain, hailstones, and sulfur engulfed them. The battle ended not by human hands, but by the power of God. I will make my holy name known among my people Israel, and the nations shall know that I am the Lord. Afterward, Israel spent 7 months burying the fallen armies. Their weapons were burned for 7 years, a testimony that no enemy can stand against the Almighty. This prophecy reminds us that God alone determines the fate of nations, and his people will always be victorious in the end. Section 23. Matthew, Jesus' spiritual battle against Satan. Matthew 4:1-11. Title: The Temptation in the Wilderness, Victory over Satan. After Jesus was baptized, the Spirit of God led him into the wilderness to be tempted by Satan. For 40 days and nights he fasted, growing weak in body but strong in spirit. Then the tempter came. First, he challenged Jesus' hunger. "If you are the Son of God, turn these stones into bread." But Jesus answered, "It is written, 'Man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God.'" Next, Satan took Jesus to the pinnacle of the temple and dared him, "Throw yourself down, for it is written, 'The angels will catch you.'" But Jesus replied, "It is written, 'Do not put the Lord your God to the test.'" Finally, Satan took Jesus to a high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world. "All this I will give you," he said, "if you bow down and worship me." But Jesus declared, "Away from me, Satan, for it is written, 'Worship the Lord your God and serve him only.'" Then the devil fled, and angels came to minister to Jesus. Section 24. Revelation, the War in Heaven, Revelation 12:7-12. Title: The Fall of Satan. Michael and his angels fight the dragon. A great war broke out in heaven. The mighty archangel Michael and his angels rose up to fight against the dragon, Satan, the deceiver of the world. The dragon fought back fiercely, his wicked angels joining the rebellion. The battle shook the heavens, light clashing against darkness. But Satan was no match for the power of God. Michael and his angels overcame the dragon, and Satan was cast down to the earth with his fallen angels. No place was found for them in heaven any more. A loud voice declared, "Now has come salvation and the power of the kingdom of our God, for the accuser of our brothers has been thrown down." Though defeated, Satan's wrath burned hotter. Knowing his time was short, he turned his fury against humanity, waging war against the followers of Christ. Yet the faithful overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony. This battle reminds us that Satan's defeat is already sealed. Christ reigns victorious for eternity. Section 25. Revelation, the Battle of Armageddon. Revelation 16:16, 19, 11-21. Title: The Final Battle. Christ's Triumph over the Nations. The time of judgment had come. The kings of the earth, deceived by the beast and false prophet, gathered their armies at Armageddon, preparing for war against the King of Kings. Then the heavens opened, and behold, a white horse. Seated upon it was Jesus Christ, faithful and true, wearing many crowns. His eyes burned like flames of fire, and his robe was dipped in blood. A name was written upon him, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Behind him, the armies of heaven followed, clothed in white, riding on majestic white horses. As the armies of the beast prepared to fight, a sharp sword came from Christ's mouth, striking down the wicked nations. He trampled the winepress of God's wrath, and no enemy could stand before him. The beast and the false prophet were seized and thrown into the lake of fire. The kings of the earth and their armies were slain by the power of his word. With this great victory, Christ established his righteous kingdom, proving that all who oppose him shall fall, and his reign will never end.